All right. All right, everybody. So welcome to Spring Forum 2022. I am super excited about this year. Diversity and inclusion, students with special needs in the art room. I think we're all going to learn so much from this, like regardless if you're pre-service or if you're actually in the classroom right now. So super pumped. And before we get started, I am going to post a link to the resource material Google folder thing that was promised. So I kind of just went around and I found some like articles with like tips and tricks for like accommodating things in your classroom and just some websites that have some really good insights. I think I found like a YouTube channel I put on there. There's a bunch of cool stuff. So make sure you check that out and make a copy and save it to your Google Drive. And if there's any issues with it, that's why I did this early, let me know so we can fix that before the forum's over. Okay, so like I said, this year, it's all about diversity and inclusion. We hope to talk about some 504 plans, IEPs, and just all in all, how to make like a inclusive and a diverse environment for your students. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to our keynote speaker, Miss Baily Koch from UNK. Baily, before you get started with your presentation, do you just wanna give us like a brief little intro of yourself?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Dr. Baily Koch. My role is senior lecturer at the University of Nebraska at Kearney. And my passion is teaching teachers how to teach students with disabilities. So that is where it's at for me. I have all sorts of certifications and all sorts of degrees and blah, 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 blah. But what's most important is the experience. And so I speak more from experience than I do from degrees. Most because I absolutely love people and I love advocating for people, especially families. We just often don't know our rights as families of individuals with exceptionalities. And so that is a major passion of mine. I also happen to be a mama to 2 kids with disabilities. So that has really fueled my passion further as well. My oldest son has high functioning autism and my youngest son has epilepsy. So they both have 504 plans. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between 504 plan accommodations versus IEP accommodations. The role of the art teacher, one thing I think you should know is my experience with art teachers has been absolutely nothing but unbelievably positive in all of my years in education. My best friend in the whole world was going to do this with me, but she ended up going to Jamaica for a wedding. So I'm slightly angry with her. But I will get over it quickly because she keeps snapping me these beautiful pictures of Jamaica and she wishes she could be here too, but she doesn't really. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me. And I'm super excited to show you all, to help you, to be a professional resource for you. That's really what I want to be for you. So.
All right, awesome, Baily. You should be able to share your screen and get on with that presentation you've got for us. So,
okay,
awesome.
Sounds good, Ashley. All right, so in the chat there, I did go ahead and include a link to my presentation so that if you would like to have that added to your resources there, Ashley, feel free to do that. Also, if you want to follow along, if you want to take notes on it or anything along those lines, all you have to do is click on that presentation and you can go to File, Make a Copy, and then it's yours. So I believe in sharing resources because we're all in it for the same reasons. We're all in it for our students. So feel free to utilize that if you would like to. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Once I get back into it. Okay. There it is. Okay, so students with exceptionalities in the art room is where it's at today. Okay, can everybody see the big screen now in the perfect? Okay, that's what I wanted to know. So like I said, this is all about students with exceptionalities in the art room. Most importantly, we are all different and that is beautiful. Art tends to be a place where individuals with exceptionalities, no matter the needs, can go and be themselves and have just a relaxing environment, because the bottom line is so many of these students live in a world of no. They often get to hear yes in the art room because art teachers tend to be so creative and so willing to look outside the box and think about how we can include students with special needs, whether those be mild needs all the way to severe exceptionalities. And so that's where I just want to, I'll give you a clap, a hands up, and say thank you from special educators everywhere for being who you are, because we never have to fight with you. And we do live in a world in which we do have to fight in order to get our kiddos into the general education classroom. So please give yourselves a hand for being those people I never have to fight with. Yay. Okay, so this is just a table of contents about what we're going to talk about today. So first off, we're going to talk why education, why art education, who benefits from inclusive art education. And if you don't know really what we mean by inclusion, essentially we mean educating students with exceptionalities along with their non-disabled peers to the maximum extent possible. We have these terms called LRE, which is least restrictive environment. You know, sometimes the art room is not the right place for students, especially, individuals with autism oftentimes do have a little bit more difficulty with the art.
I'm unsure Dr. Koch can hear us or not, but she did freeze on my end.
She froze on my end too. Baily, if you can hear us, you kind of froze. Darn internet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, looks like she got kicked out.
She may have quit out and is coming back in. So
okay.
Let's give her a second.
Oh, there she is. Okay.
Welcome. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I am so sorry. I live in the country and we have a windy day and a rainy day. And so my internet just dropped. Like everything went black. So I am on my hotspot now. Am I lagging or are we doing okay?
You're good now.
Okay. All right. Let's all just pray that Verizon holds out. Okay. Because the rest of my internet is gone. You know what, just to be safe, if anything does happen, I just give my apologies in advance. However, what I would do then is I would create a video that I would send out with this presentation. So please don't panic. I would just do that and you would end up getting it later, but hopefully we're okay now. Okay. Okay. So let's reshare. Let's start this over here. Okay, can you see that okay? Perfect. All right, so we were talking about 504 versus IEP and what the difference is, especially what that means for an art teacher. We're also going to talk about what are the most common exceptionalities that you're going to see in the art room, and then differentiation methods and accommodations that would be very easily implemented into your art room. Sound good? Perfect, perfect. Okay, so point number one, why art education? Who benefits from inclusion? Answer, absolutely everybody. there is nobody who does not benefit from inclusion. Question to you art teachers and future art teachers, will you have students with disabilities in your classrooms? Give me either a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I see lots of thumbs up and you are exactly right. You will. There is absolutely no there is absolutely no chance that you will not have students with disabilities in your art room. So my passion in life is to get more teachers to have more training in special education, because no matter who you are, no matter what you're going to teach, you will have students with disabilities in your art room. And the bottom line is, we special educators, we are here to help you. We are not here to do your job for you. You do have to provide accommodations in your classroom. What my role is to help you be able to do so. And obviously, I have absolutely no problem with using my expertise to help you learn how to provide those special education accommodations. The issue comes in when we have teachers who, and I've never had this in art, so keep that in mind, when we have teachers who will bring us all these assignments and say, hey, adapt this for a student. Okay, but if we're using universal design for learning and these other differentiation methods, the chances of you having to adapt something to the level that many people think you have to adapt it are slim to none. So we're going to not overcomplicate accommodations, okay? That's going to be the goal here. And the other thing that I was talking about very much earlier was with individuals with autism and social behavior difficulties. That is where inclusion helps all students, absolutely everybody. We learn acceptable social behaviors, because one of the greatest challenges that we have is not doing too much for our students. They have to learn, because the goal, just like with parenting, right? The goal is that they can survive without you after they leave your classroom. If we do too much for our students, we're essentially pushing them back. We're not helping them at all. And while it's difficult to watch a student struggle or let a student struggle, we have to do that. We have to step back. And those social behaviors and natural consequences and those challenges that come along with that, those work very, very well in the art room. We see a lot of really positive things happen in there. Okay. So essentially, these are some of the things that I have noticed that are so beneficial for having students with exceptionalities in the art room. One is freedom and creativity. Again, these students live in the world of high tension a lot of times, because they're basically told that they don't belong in many aspects of the world. And there are still so many challenges. We've come so far, we absolutely have, but there are so many challenges that these students still struggle with on the daily. And the art room tends to be a place where they can let down their guard, where they can relax a little bit. You know, it's really the same thing as having a teenager, and especially with high functioning autism. When he's at school all day long, he's working so hard to be good that when he comes home in the afternoon, he is exhausted. And typically as parents, we get the worst of our children because they're finally letting down their guard, you know? And so sometimes that can happen in the art room because of that feeling of being able to relax. And that's where we end up getting some of those behaviors, and why it's so important to work closely with special education, and to accept help where help is needed and is warranted. Absolutely. So social emotional learning. Have any of you heard of social emotional learning? Yay. Okay. Social emotional learning is essentially interweaving social and emotional assignments and activities into your day without even really trying to, without even realizing it. You're essentially teaching your students how to accept help, how to be okay with who they are, how to talk about their needs, and be able to freely express, hey, this is something that would help me. Would you be able to provide me with this so that I can be successful in this environment? But we have to teach those moments of self-advocacy, and social emotional learning really, really helps us to be able to do that. Also, the art room provides students independence, a break from the word no, because oftentimes these kids are hearing, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. But in the art room, a lot of times we are able to say yes a lot more often, just because it does allow, or it should allow, for much more creativity and much more unstructured time, allowing students to really experience that success socially, in the art form, all sorts of different things. Okay, so those are some of the most important things that I see. Now, the other thing, and I just kind of want to do a little activity here with you. Okay. Now, what I want you to do, look at those 3 words on the screen there. Do you see that? Whirl, slapstick, and cinerama? Okay. I would like you to start with that first word, whirl, and unscramble it to find the other word in there. Okay. Once you find that one, go ahead and do it with slapstick. And then once you find that one, go ahead and do it with cinerama. Okay. Start from the front. It won't take you very long. It'll be super easy. So I'll give you just a few seconds to do that. Okay, probably have moved on to the second word now. And I might be giving you too much time. I'm not sure. Maybe this is pretty simple. Okay, I'm guessing everybody has those 3 words figured out by now. So what is the first word? Can anybody tell me? Are you feeling uncomfortable? There is no word. Okay, how about the second word? Anybody figure that one out? No, still feeling a little uncomfortable. You're feeling kind of dumb. Yeah, no, there's no word in that one either. How about the third one? Okay, so the third word is American. But see, what I did is I made you feel so dumb that you gave up before you even got to that third word. You weren't even willing to try, were you? How fun is that? Oh, look at that. Dr. Koch made you feel really dumb. And how easy was that for me to do? By telling you, 1, this is easy. You should already be on to the second one. This shouldn't take you that long. Okay. So I basically made you feel dumb just by telling you, you should already have this done because everybody else does, right? Like it shouldn't take you that much longer. Okay. By the time that you got to the third word, you had already given up on yourself. You were like, all right, somebody else in this Zoom meeting is going to do this. Okay. You just experienced learned helplessness, ladies and gentlemen. And our students, if they do not experience success, will have given up before they even start. And in the art room, we can help them experience success. In every room, we can help them experience success. But the bottom line is we have to allow them to experience that in order to believe in themselves. That is absolutely key. And that is so important for social emotional learning. They have to learn how to believe in their own abilities to accomplish a task. Are you mad at me for doing that to you? I'm sorry, not sorry. Right? These are situations we have to understand, and we have to feel what our students with exceptionalities and so many people often feel. Okay, so let's move on. What is the most important to understand about special education? Over here on this sticky note right there. Special education is a service. It is not a place. Okay. We do not say, oh, that student is in special education, therefore let's send that student to the special education room. No, that is not what we do in special education. What we do is we support students in accessing that learning in the general education classroom to the maximum extent possible. Accommodations do not lower expectations for what students learn. They just help them access that learning. Simple as that. Let's imagine right now that hanging from the ceiling, I'd like you to imagine hanging from the ceiling, there are $2 bills. Okay. And we have a student standing underneath them who is 6'5" and another one who is 4'11". Okay. And what I tell those two students is I say, okay, on the count of 3, you're going to reach up and grab that dollar bill. And whichever one gets to the dollar bill first gets to keep both of them. 1, 2, 3, go. What's going to happen? The student who was born taller is going to access that dollar bill and he gets to keep both of them. But that's fair because the student who's 4'10", it is her fault that she was born shorter, right? 100% her fault. Now, what if we imagine in this situation, I pull up a chair and I tell the student who is 4'10" to stand on this chair. And then I hang the dollar bills back up and I tell those students, okay, count of 3, reach up and grab a dollar bill. If you each get to one, you both get to keep your very own dollar bill. That is learning, ladies and gentlemen. That is accommodations. All I did was give the student who was naturally shorter than the other student a chair. That was super hard for me. So hard for me to give the student a chair so that she could access her own dollar bill, so that she could access her own learning and does not have to live up to the expectations of the taller student, because that would be really difficult to do. Okay, we can't just make her grow like 14 inches overnight. I don't remember what heights I gave, and I don't math very well, but we can't do that. Okay, it doesn't work that way. So the bottom line is we just have to help our students access that learning so that they can find their very own best. And we're not going to give away all of the learning to the students who it comes to easily. Those are the students who struggle the most in college, though, am I right? The students who never learned how to study. Exactly. Yes. It's so true. It's so true. All right. So now let's talk about the difference between IEP and 504 plan. Ashley, how long am I supposed to talk? I kind of forgot.
Let me pull up the schedule. I think our break is at, oh gosh, sorry, hold on. Where'd it go? We go on break at 11:10, so you still got quite a while.
Oh, good. Okay, perfect. Perfect. I was hoping that I didn't have only a half hour because I'm not sure I can talk that fast. Okay, so here we have the difference between an IEP and a 504 plan. Does anybody have any idea of what the difference between these two might be? I see Bob shaking his head. Ashley's kind of going, yeah, but I don't really want to unmute to say anything. Okay.
Unmute.
Go ahead.
Hi. My name's Cameron Dossel, and I'm an art teacher here in Kearney. And when I was in school, I had a 504 plan because I have type 1 diabetes. So that was kind of the difference for me, is like, in my mind, 504 is more physical disabilities. IEP is more towards things that are going on up here. Is that right?
Well, I love what you said. I love what you said. Bob, you had started to unmute. What were you thinking?
IEP is a special education identification, and 504 plans are for children who have disabilities that are in general education.
Okay. All right. So you are absolutely correct, Bob. And Cameron, you are on the right track. And I'm going to explain to you the difference between those two. So you're absolutely right that there can be physical disabilities, and we're just going to keep on going. Excellent. Thank you both for your participation here. Okay. So essentially, IEPs are special education, just like Bob said. So a student who has an IEP has a disability that falls into one of the 13 categories of disabilities that we have defined by IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We have categories for autism, for specific learning disability, for orthopedic impairment. So Cameron, we do still have physical disabilities in IEPs as well. We have hearing impairment, including deafness. We have visual impairment, including blindness. We have its own whole category for deaf and blindness. We have, losing my mind, did I say autism? We have all sorts of them. There are 13, okay? I'm not gonna have to read all of them. The most important thing though, with special education is that the funds come from an entirely different place than general education. Okay. And anybody who has one of these disabilities, whose disability affects their ability to effectively be in the general education environment without supports, will need an IEP. Okay, so they are needing very specialized, more accommodations than only general education can provide. But the goal is to get students off of an IEP. That's the goal. We would love that. We would love for all students to learn how to accept those supports and then no longer need these services. Okay, we would love that, because unfortunately, as much as I hate to admit it, there is a stigma that's attached to being in special education. And we're going to try and squash that stigma, but it still very much exists. Okay, now accommodations are adjustments to how students access that learning. An IEP allows us to provide accommodations throughout the entire day, but we also, if the student through an IEP, we don't like to do that, but if it is the student's least restrictive environment to need that extra space, we can do that. Okay, now modifications are literally changes to what is expected of the student. That doesn't mean that we're just giving these adjustments to help the student access the curriculum that's available to all students. Modifications mean that we are changing the curriculum to meet the needs of a student. Modifications tend to be for students with more severe exceptionalities, perhaps a cognitive impairment. Oh, there's another category under IDEA. Just found it. Perhaps we have a cognitive impairment. Most of you are probably familiar with Down syndrome. Okay, have we heard of Down syndrome? It's a very visual, we can see it. Okay, most times Down syndrome causes a substantial enough cognitive disability that we need very specialized instruction, especially in the form of life skills, so that we can help that student be able to live independently or semi-independently after they have left the school walls. Most times, students who are receiving a modified curriculum are able to be educated in this public school environment up until the age of 21. Okay, so that's really the difference between accommodations and modifications. Modifications are very specific. Most times an individual who receives modifications will not receive the traditional diploma, will have a specialized diploma for them, showing that they did not meet the same expectations as other students without these more severe disabilities. Do you see the difference between accommodations and modifications here? Okay, perfect. Now, the question is, can we provide accommodations with a 504 plan? Answer, yes. Everybody go like this. Yes, we do provide accommodations with a 504 plan. Okay. So a 504 plan is general education. It is a completely different law. It is actually Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and it has nothing to do with special education. The only thing that we use it for in special education is that sometimes we serve as a person who can help you identify what accommodations need to be provided, because we tend to be experts on accommodations, right? So the worst thing that many public schools still do, and I absolutely hate, is put their special education staff in charge of implementing 504 plans. No, we do not do that, because that really blurs those lines between special and general education. So Cameron, you said that you had a 504 plan. Do you remember who was in charge of that 504 plan? Are you willing to share?
I think it was the principal that we met with when I was in school.
Wonderful. Well done for your school. It's great to have a principal who is in charge of implementing those. In my son's school, they both have 504 plans. The high school counselor is in charge of the high school 504 plans, and the middle school counselor is in charge of the middle school 504 plans. It has nothing to do with special education, but that counselor is able to work with a special educator if they need help in figuring out what kind of accommodations to provide. Okay, so we're just kind of there for help, but very rarely do we actually attend 504 plans. really doesn't have anything to do with us. Okay, so patience, again, just adjustments to how students access that learning. And sometimes we need to do that for our students. Cameron had, I think she said, did you say diabetes, Cameron? Okay, so chances are simple accommodations for that were probably monitoring of the sugar level within your blood, correct? Do special educators have to be there in order to do that? Probably not. Okay. So that was a very simple thing that we can do within general education. Christy, did you unmute? Did you want something to say?
Oh, no.
No, okay, sorry. I just saw the deal pop off and I wanted to make sure I gave you a chance. Okay, so my sons both have 504 plans. My oldest son has high functioning autism. However, he does very well in the school environment. His grades are not suffering because of his autism. Every now and then we get behaviors. And those behaviors typically come when he is in a less structured environment and when he is not challenged, because unfortunately my son has an extremely high IQ. Do not tell him that I admitted that to you. Okay. I am smarter than him, according to me. Okay. Unfortunately, it's not true. He is highly intelligent, and it can be quite a challenge for his teachers to be able to get up to that level. Now, what is so cool about Hudson's 504 plan, he is enrolled in every single honors class that are offered at his grade level. And that's very, very important for his core subjects. He has to be in those higher ability classes, and we see absolutely no problems in there. However, my son can be a little bit of a challenge in the art room. So this mama has had to work very closely with the art teacher. What is so funny, you guys, this just happened last night. So funny. My son's art teacher, my son is a freshman in high school, and he loves art. So he has signed up for Art 2 next year. And right now in COZAD, there is an art show going on with the students who were selected to, like 30 students were selected to show off their work. And my son walks up to his art teacher and he said, Mr. Botts, are you going to show off any of my artwork? And Mr. Botts goes, "Oh, Hudson, you suck at painting. I absolutely love having you in my classroom, but no." And my son, no, it's okay, Christy. I know that sounds terrible. My son has autism. He needs that honesty. That teacher has figured out, and he did not say it in a mean way, in any way, shape, or form. He knows my son, and he loves him, and he allows him to be himself and to, like, patronizing, what is that word? It does not work for my child. And that art teacher has figured that out so much, and I love him for it. I know that does not work for every student, for every teacher, and for every student. I fully understand that. But the bottom line, it makes me teary-eyed. The bottom line is that teacher knows my child. He has been able to allow him to be himself. And most times when these students are creating something and are really focusing on certain aspects of shade and things that we're really trying to get specific, he literally allows my son to just paint. Like, just do what you want to do. Like, you do not have to focus on all of these things. I just want you to just be. And my son will sign up for art class every single year. I know he will. Is he going to be a famous artist? No, he is not. And we are all okay with that. Exactly. It's fine. It's fine. Because that art room for my son is just, it is just the perfect place for him to just be. Now, in his other classes, and when we do see behaviors, guess what his 504 plan allows? It allows him to go to Mrs. Bean's room and grab a Mountain Dew. Yep. And that sounds so silly, but for my child with a combination of high functioning autism and ADHD, caffeine does not hype my kid up. It calms him and allows him to focus. And that's very common for students with ADHD, but it doesn't require special education. He doesn't need a special educator to walk into this room. He's very intelligent. I don't want special education doing these things for my son. I want him to figure out, to realize within himself, hey, I'm having some behavior issues now. Maybe it only takes a teacher to say something to my child like, you may be getting a little bit too unbalanced here, or you're having a hard time focusing. And my son now, after this many years having a 504, and every single teacher is like, oh, absolutely, go, come right back. And he'll chug that Mountain Dew in the hallway and he'll come back. He'll be totally fine. It's the strangest thing. It's the simplest accommodation, but that's all he needs. Okay, so don't overthink and allow parents to be a part of it. I remember when I first told my husband that we were going to just need to start giving our son more Mountain Dew. My husband was like, are you kidding me? Why would we do that? And he's a believer now. And so many teachers are. They have like a stockpile of Mountain Dew and Dr. Pepper in Mrs. Bean's room because it works so well for so many students with ADHD. That it's kind of transferred to others now. Again, 504 plans are very easily implemented. Most times we do not need special education at all, okay? And a lot of times the meeting itself to determine what is needed is sometimes just between the parents and a principal, or the parents and a counselor. And then that information is provided to all of the general education teachers who have that student, and then they can follow up as needed. But the key is to make sure that those accommodations are being provided, and that's where the principal or the counselor will follow up, and where the student is taught to advocate for his or herself. Cameron, I'm guessing you figured out pretty quickly how to know when your sugars were getting off. Okay, and you knew what to do in order to ask for accommodations. That's the goal of a 504 plan. Oftentimes, the other things that we use a 504 plan for would be somebody like me who has many surgeries. Temporary, but the physical limitations of my surgeries cause me to need accommodations in the short term. Oftentimes we will use a 504 plan for that. Students with cancer, who we can't fail a student in 9th grade just because she was diagnosed with cancer, but we can do a 504 plan so that it is on paper that this student is going to be allowed to do entirely remote classes and classwork in order to ensure that she can still meet the requirements of 9th grade and can still pass. Do you see how we can use that without needing special education there? Okay, so that's what a 504 plan is all about. All right, what are we going to see? You know what? I want to just pause really quickly here. Am I going too fast? Are we doing okay? Good. Okay. All right. Perfect. All right, so common exceptionalities. This is data from 2019 to 2020 school year. 33% of students receiving special education accommodations or modifications were classified under the specific learning disability category. There are 8 subcategories under specific learning disability. It can be math calculation, oral expression, reading comprehension, reading fluency. See, I always just keep losing them, but there are 8 underneath that. So most of your students will have a specific learning disability in a specific area. Do we need to do any accommodations in the art room for a student who has a specific learning disability in the area of math calculation? Do you do math calculation in art? Maybe. Okay. So should you be there at the IEP meeting? Yes, you should. Because if a student has a disability in math calculation and you're trying to figure out dimensions of something in order to ensure that it is to scale, might we need to help them and provide a little bit more assistance? We might. Okay, we don't know. And so it's important to be there so that those accommodations are provided. 19% of our students have a speech or language impairment. Now, there is a difference. Speech is what comes out of your mouth and the way that others can hear it. Language is the brain, it's what your brain is telling you to, or to understand what somebody else is telling you. Okay, there's a difference between speech and language. So that's why there's that or there. Might we need to provide accommodations for a student with a speech language impairment? We might. Okay. Other health impairment includes all sorts of different things, but primarily we see that include ADHD. That's probably the most common. Asthma, more prevalent in females than it is in males, but it is absolutely possible that it's in males as well. Epilepsy, like my son had, and then diabetes. So Cameron, if your diabetes had been bad enough to maybe stop you from being able to attend school at different times and was really affecting your grades, you absolutely could have had an IEP. But clearly it was recognized that you did not require special education services. So it sounds to me like your school did a wonderful job in not pigeonholing you into special education for those purposes. Let's do claps for that. That's wonderful. That's exactly what I want to hear. 11% of our students with disabilities will be somewhere on the spectrum of autism spectrum disorder. You have probably heard of autism, individuals rocking back and forth, flapping their arms, being completely nonverbal. And I just told you about my son whose IQ is so high, it's confusing. Okay. I had to homeschool my child of my children 8th grade and 5th grade year due to COVID because my younger son has epilepsy, and when he gets sick, his seizures go through the roof. We didn't know enough about COVID-19 to feel comfortable with putting him into a public school classroom that year. So I homeschooled my kids, and UNK graciously allowed me to work entirely from home because I'm very blessed to work for this university. And so that year, that I was homeschooling my children, my child got through Math 8 in 1 quarter with me. And why? Because I made him teach me. Because I did not know how to teach my child Math 8. I flipped it around and I said, okay, we're going to do this. And he went so fast. He flew through that. We started Algebra 1, which would normally be his his freshman year of high school. He finished Algebra 1 and he was able to start his freshman year in public school this year in geometry. So the bottom line is we do not know the needs of individuals with autism unless we go to that IEP meeting, we meet that kiddo, we talk to them, we allow them to tell us what they need. There is such a huge spectrum. And really that's the same with all disabilities, but autism seems to be one that is just enormous. 7% of our students had developmental delay. That category actually falls off by the time usually that we get to kindergarten. So I know that art, we are K-12 educators. Very rarely will you see the category of developmental delay past like 1st grade. It has likely either disappeared because the student overcame the challenges that resulted from a developmental delay, or they have been able to classify it under what the developmental delay ended up leading to later. So most times you won't actually see that category, but it's there for our early childhood needs. 6% is intellectual disability, which tends to be a cognitive impairment. Down syndrome would fall into this category. 5% emotional disturbance. This would be where severe depression would fall in. Anxiety can fall into emotional disturbance. I have seen it go into emotional disturbance and other health impairment. Kind of depends upon that student's needs and what their characteristics are. And then multiple disabilities is when we possibly have an intellectual disability, but we also have autism spectrum disorder. We also have a hearing impairment. So there are so many disabilities that are affecting this kiddo that we put it into a category of multiple disabilities. And so that's about 2% of our students. So the vast majority of our students will be SLD, speech or language, other health impairment, or autism, that top line there. Okay, so differentiation and accommodations is our next most important area, if you ask me. What I want to talk about right now is universal design for learning. Have you ever heard of UDL? Yay, Ashley, perfect. Okay, absolutely. We hope that we have seen universal design for learning. Do not overcomplicate universal design for learning. Do not overcomplicate providing accommodations, because the bottom line is, ladies and gentlemen, if we are using universal design for learning to its maximum potential, very few further accommodations will need to be made, especially for our students with more mild disabilities like specific learning disability, even ADHD, anxiety, things along those lines. Okay. What universal design for learning is it is essentially providing multiple means of representation, multiple ways for the students to be engaged in their learning, and multiple ways for the students to express what they have learned. Okay. And you're sitting here thinking multiple ways. Oh no, I can't provide multiple ways. Well, ladies and gents, let's take a look at what I'm doing right now. I am presenting this material, the what of what you're learning, in a variety of ways. You are looking at my screen up in front of you, correct? That is one. I am talking through the information. So if you are a visual learner, you're watching my screen. If you are an auditory learner, you are listening to me, correct? You're getting that in two different ways right there. Also, I have provided you with a link to this. So you can also be taking notes on it if you choose to. You're not required to, but if you choose to, you absolutely can, correct? That's 3 different ways of representing the material right there. Simple as that. Was that super hard for me to do? Nope, it wasn't. Teachers do it all the time. You talk about the assignment and you have it up there, or you have them have a handout. That's 2 right there. Okay. Then we're also going to provide multiple ways for the students to engage in the learning, to actually interact with it. Okay. Now, a lot of times the things that I'm doing can overlap into multiple categories. So you can be engaged in the content, again, by me talking to you. There's that verbal, by looking at it, by interacting with it. So the exact same 3 things that I just did. But also, if you are somebody who is struggling with paying attention, maybe you have a giant black dog on the floor who is snoring and farting. Yes, that is happening right over there in my bedroom right now. A giant black dog is not making anything smell wonderful for me in this room. So essentially, it's hard for me to concentrate right now on my learning, right? Is that possible for our students? Something is distracting them in that moment, whatever it ends up being. Okay. Yes, it is. So guess what I did? I provided you with a link to this presentation that you can access at any time when your brain will allow you to absorb the material better. You are recording this presentation that you can access anytime when your brain will allow you to do it better. And every time that I have had you unmute, I made you very uncomfortable with the learned helplessness activity. Okay, I'm trying to get you to actually interact with the learning. That's engagement. And I just did all of those things without even really thinking about it. Then action and expression. I'm not actually telling all of you that you have to show me what you've learned today. But if I were, I would have probably provided you a fill in the blank worksheet to take notes with this. And that would be a 100% grade in my grade book if all you did was follow along and filled in the blanks for those notes based upon my presentation. I didn't make you do that this time, but it would be very, very easy for me to provide that for you later, so that if you would like to see what that might look like, I would be happy to do that. So I can provide that for you just so that you get an idea of what that looks like. And that helps students be able to take notes and just really engage with that learning, and also show you how much they learned. And you can take that as an easy grade and allow them to experience success, like we talked about with that learned helplessness activity. How hard is UDL? It's not that difficult, right? Okay, and then I provided you a link right there to view more about universal design for learning if you would like to. There are great examples, activities, all sorts of different things when it comes to universal design for learning. So feel free to check that out. Okay, now a lot of our students in the art room will struggle with paying attention, correct? Around 14% of them. Okay, so what we can do for those students, we can provide an outline of the lesson, allow students to check things off as they happen within your classroom. How many of you make lists? Just to check things off. Do you ever write something down that you already did just so you can see that check? I do that all the time. Right? Exactly. See, we are not alone in this. So let your students do it too. Think about the things that you benefit from. I guarantee you, your students are the same. A lot of these things overlap for so many people. Okay. Record your lectures, set up a camera every time that you're going to introduce a lesson. No big deal. Guess what? You just made your life a lot easier by posting it on Canvas for any students who were gone, and say, absolutely, just hop on Canvas, click that link, and you will see everything that we talked about. Then you don't have to explain it to students over and over and over again either. Providing accommodations for students are really simple, and they make your life a lot easier as well. If you record those lectures, it can help your students who struggle with attention. It can help you with those students who were gone. It can help, like I said, they can go back and review it when their brains are in the correct headspace. And then the other thing is, if you are providing notes, like if you're doing a lesson on art history or something, that can be very, very overwhelming. And so just put fewer items per page. If you have too many things kind of chunked up, that can be very overwhelming for a student who struggles with paying attention. They kind of tend to look at the bottom of it before they even look at the top. So make it a bigger font, fewer items per page. Very simple that way. And I do definitely recommend fill in the blank worksheets. I can show you an example of those. Okay, reading accommodations. So for a student who struggles with reading, you can provide books on tape. Do any of you like books on tape? Like just listening to books on tape? Okay, I absolutely love it. I have fallen in love with Libby, the Nebraska Overdrive. That I can get any audiobook for free from my local library. Just giving a plug to my local library and your local library. It is wonderful. So we can do that for our students if we need. Also, we can use fill in the blank book notes. I will give you an example of those here shortly. Actually, let me just hop right into that real quick. Let's go back into my drive here. Okay, here. Can you see that? It says icebreaker right up there in front of me. Do you see that says icebreaker? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go into this slideshow. This was a presentation that I just gave not too long ago. And what I did was I provided a link right there in the table of contents. I was presenting this to our secondary educators club. And when they clicked on this link, it opened this up. There you go. All right, so this is what fill in the blank presentation notes would look like if I had provided them. And I'm kind of regretting that I didn't provide them for all of you. I'm very sorry. I should have done that, but I can do these again for all of you. Accommodations are an blank of the environment, assignment, or equipment that allows the students to access the content like their peers. So throughout that presentation, I would have said this word. Likely it was also written on the slide up in front of those students so they can see that. You can easily fill that in. As we go through all of this, essentially they would just be filling out these blanks based upon something I'm saying or what is on the slide. And those students would be able to complete these notes really without any problem. And then again, it's a 100%. Okay, so that is one thing that I will do often. Let me get back to this. Okay. There we go. All right. So those fill in the blank notes are really helpful. Also, how many of you loved it when your teacher called on you to read out loud? Yeah, I'm guessing none of you. Nobody likes that. And it really doesn't help very many people at all. Okay. Essentially, it creates a lot of anxiety. However, there are some people who love to read out loud. So figure out who those people are and let them read out loud. Simple as that. If they like to do it, allow them to do it. And then the other students are hearing that material. So that helps tremendously too. Or you can read it out loud to all students, which is what I choose to do. And that's fine too. So very simple. All right. And then if we have physical needs, if we have something like an orthopedic impairment, one, unless the student is completely nonverbal and unable to tell you what they need, which is unlikely, but there will be some students who have those types of struggles. They would likely have a para with them most of the time, or one-on-one, even in the art room, in order to help them communicate. So allow the student to tell you what they need. Just say, hey, what is it that, is it hard to hold a paintbrush? Okay, if it's hard to hold a paintbrush, then we're going to use this instead. There are all sorts of assistive technology devices available for art. Have you ever looked into those?
So, and I'm going to interrupt real quick. In that resource thing I made for us, I actually did like a list of like essential like tools we should have in our classroom for accommodations. And I provided some links where you could go and buy and purchase accommodated tools for your classroom. So just so you know.
I love that, Ashley. And that totally just led into something that I was going to tell you. Do not be afraid to ask for those devices from the special education director. Okay. Do not be afraid to approach special ed, because as somebody who knows enough about a special education budget, I know one of the most important things, ladies and gentlemen, is we cannot, like, it is a law in special education that we cannot spend less than we did the year before. How interesting is that? Yes, yes. That is literally a special education financial law. We are required to spend the same amount of money from special education funding or more every single year. So most of the time, there is money built into the budget. Do not let this, don't talk to the principal about this. They know nothing about this. They don't know about special education funding for IEPs. It comes from a very different place. Do not be afraid to ask for those. If there's no money in the budget, there's no money in the budget, but I bet you there is. Okay. They just don't want to shout that from the rooftop, because general education, and that's why it's a law, general education would love to just dip into that special education funding. Nope, comes from a different place. So if a student has an IEP and needs an assistive device, do not be afraid to go and ask for it. Okay. So again, assistive devices, ask your SPED director for funding. That is very, very important. Also, we can have a pitch painter instead of a pinch runner. We can have another student who can literally listen to a student describe their ideas and work on doing it for them, especially if their hands don't work. Or we can put a paintbrush in a student's mouth. Heck, we can put a paintbrush in a student's toes. I don't care where you put it, but see if the student can do it on his or her own. Okay. If not, allow them to describe their ideas in order for somebody else to pinch paint for them. And it really does, it helps in so many other ways. Think about the amount of learning that they're getting in language, in expressive language for an activity like that. Okay. There's all sorts of different things that can happen there. This is a wonderful website that I would like to share with you. There are so many accommodations. Understood.org is my absolute favorite website to use. And the reason for that is that it is written in language that every single person can understand. It is written in parent and family language, and there's so much great information on there for provided accommodations. It's just wonderful. So understood.org, make sure that you write that down or you link to that. It is a great resource to put in there. Most importantly, we need to allow our students to experience success. I got to go back to that learned helplessness activity and how frustrated you felt. I really, really, really want you to talk to your students about what they need, allow them to self-advocate, allow them to experience success in that art room. And you will continue to do what all of my art teachers have done over all of the years, which is include students, love them for who they are, allow them to experience success in their own ways, not compared to anybody else. And that makes for a beautiful, inclusive art education environment. And I'm just so darn proud of y'all for going that direction, because we are very thankful. And there's my email. I always tell my students, just because you're done being my student doesn't mean I'm done being your teacher. live with it. Okay, so I am here to be a resource for you. Should you ever have any questions, maybe a student comes into your classroom and you're thinking, I want to accommodate the student, but I can't really think of what to do. Hey, send me an email and we can powwow. Just don't give me any student information. Simple as that. And then I can be a resource for you the entire time. That confidentiality is not an issue as long as you don't tell me who they are. Okay, so that is my email right there. It is it's Koch, let's face it, but it's pronounced Koch, Koch, B as in Baily, J as in Jade at unk.edu. And I will be at UNK as long as they will have me. So we'll just do it that way. All right. Any questions? I didn't even get to the chat if there are any questions here. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Bob. Oh, wonderful. Bob provided us with some great things over here in chat. That's wonderful. Thank you. Excellent. All right. I'm done with my presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
So I have a question.
Sure.
So with those, like, okay, so for my future classroom, I had thought about like just like purchasing like accommodated scissors and those sort of things just to keep in my classroom and have them live in there. But if those special education, like part of your school or whatever has that much money for those tools and like has all those things, like the art people usually just don't have a big budget. Would you like suggest like just asking if you need them or just like buying a pair for yourself to like live in your classroom? Like, does that make sense?
100% ask special education for the funding to live in your classroom. There's no reason that it would have to live in the special education room. Okay, so
really?
No, absolutely not. Because like I said, with special education, the goal is inclusion to the maximum extent possible, right? So if you are looking for scissors specifically for students with special needs, that is absolutely a special education funding issue, or not even issue, but an item. And you can absolutely ask for that. And then they can live in your classroom. Now, if they need, if a teacher in English is going to be doing an activity, it's very possible they may come into your classroom and say, hey, I know that you have some special art scissors for this student with an orthopedic impairment with cerebral palsy. That's very common. So they may just come in and borrow one for a while. That's not a problem at all.
Okay. So definitely should I approach that special ed teacher and be like, hey, would you guys be willing to help me purchase materials to for me to keep in my art room for students with special needs? Just like
yes,
that?
absolutely. But go to the SPED director, because a SPED teacher has nothing to do. Yep. A SPED teacher has nothing to do with that budget. So you're going to go to the SPED director. Absolutely. And if the worst they can do is say no, because they may need to tie it specifically to a student, but I doubt it. Excuse me.
Well, awesome. Thank you. That was really helpful.
Absolutely.
I have a quick question as well. Baily, love your message. Thank you. Educator of 32 years, I learned new things today. So thank you so much. It's
Yay.
I do have a logistical question. So let's say I'm teaching 700 students in my building. And let's say on the low end, I have 10% of my children who are in special education, and that's probably a little low. That's 70 IEPs I have to attend in a year. If logistically I can't do that because of all my other things, what other ways can I find out that information?
That is excellent. So if a special educator is doing their job, they are providing you with an opportunity to give input regarding that student's needs in your classroom. So perhaps that student has never shown any sign that he or she needs accommodations for that specific disability in your art classroom. You can send a quick email to the case manager in special education and can say, hey, Bobby has never shown any signs of needing accommodations. However, I am 100% on board with providing them should he need them, but I'd like to be part of the conversation, because as you know, the goal is to not provide accommodations if we don't have to. If a student can access that learning without needing specialized instruction, specialized materials or anything, that's what we want to see, because we don't want them to stay in special education. So we can very easily send an email and say, hey, let's just chat back and forth about whether or not we need to list accommodations as necessary in my art classroom. They may not be needed, which means you don't have to go to 70 IEPs. Does that help? Okay.
All right, awesome. So if we have any more questions for Miss Baily Koch, she is going to be one of our panelists in our panel discussion. So you can ask her some questions about the presentation if you didn't get the chance to ask it then. But it is 11:09. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break and get back here at about 11:20. If you want to stay on and just chit chat or whatever, get to know each other, we can. But otherwise, go use the bathroom, go stretch, get a snack, do whatever you need. So. Okay, so I don't know if everybody can hear me, but it's 11:19, so let's kind of try to get settled and back here. Okay, and so it is 11:20. So I hope you guys enjoyed your break and got time to stretch and do whatever you needed to. But now it's time for our panel discussion. So our panelists for this discussion are going to be Miss Baily Koch, Lorinda Rice, Jessie Mayo, and Miss Julie Ryan. So we like to go kind of like informally about this. So if you have any questions at all, go ahead and ask them. Just as a little incentive, as a reminder, we are doing that gift card drawing at the end. So if you ask a question, your name gets entered again for an even bigger chance to win a gift card. So keep that in mind. If you have questions but don't want to speak, you can type them in the chat and I'll go ahead and read them. And if you want to like ask a question more anonymously, send me a private message and I'll be sure not to say your name or anything. What else do I got here? I think that's about it. So I posted in the chat a link to a Google Doc with prompt questions. So if you have trouble like coming up with your own, there are some there. I think Baily actually answered some of them in her presentation. But if you still need some clarity, feel free to ask them again. So yeah, but to start things off, to get kind of things rolling, let's go ahead and have each of our panelists tell us a little bit about themselves and their experience with working with students with special needs. Baily, I know you did answer that already, so if you want, we can skip you. So, but we can go ahead and start with, let's start with Lorinda, and then we will just popcorn around.
All right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Lorinda Rice. I'm the art curriculum specialist for Lincoln Public Schools. And so I help and serve 95 art teachers in our district K-12. What I have the opportunity to do also is I am part of the equity, diversity, and inclusion component of Nebraska Art Teachers Association, and am also serving on the national level in understanding how art curriculum can be more inclusive, and knowing new ways of learning, knowing new artists and new ways of creating. And so my work is really also about that equity component of how is our curriculum being more inclusive to the students that we serve.
Awesome, thanks, Lorinda. Jessie, do you want to go ahead and go next?
Yep. If you see me looking in that direction, it's because my daughter's down here playing and she just likes to go on a bunch of different things. Hi, Lila. You want to say hi? She'll probably come over. So I'm Jessie. I'm currently the 712 art teacher at the Winnebago reservation. And actually next year I will be the K-12 art teacher at Elkhorn Valley. Oh, she came to say hi. And from my experience, special education is actually prior to being an art teacher, I was a special educator at Wayne High School for 712 for 2 years.
All right, awesome. And then finally, Julie, do you want to go ahead?
Hi, I'm Julie Ryan. I am a teacher in Omaha Public Schools. I have been teaching special populations of students my entire career, which, like Bob, is somewhere in the 20-year range, I think 25-ish. My specialty, if you will, it's kind of, as Dr. Koch mentioned earlier, by experience, right, for doing it for so long. My specialty is working with deaf and hard of hearing, but I also have years and years of experience teaching in self-contained classrooms for multi-categorical disabilities. So I kind of run the gamut. I have a couple of personal, life connections. I have family members that have special needs, and so it has been a interest of mine and working with my family members as well as my students for a very long time.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, guys, so we're gonna open this up now. So does anybody have any questions? Okay, so I will go ahead and get the ball rolling then. So this is something I've kind of been thinking about a little bit. Kids are just curious. That's how it is. Kids are curious. So if a student asks a question about another student who has like a disability, how do you respond? Because I know there are some things with HIPAA that would like restrict you. So like, how do you like answer a question like a student has about a student with a disability without crossing those lines while still like answering the student's question? I don't know, that was kind of a lot, but.
I'm happy to jump in here just for a minute, and anybody else who wants to jump in as well. One of the things that I am very passionate about, and I'm trying very hard to get more teachers to understand and also be passionate about, is that communication with family. And so essentially, if we speak to the parents, the families of our individuals with exceptionalities within our classrooms at the start of the year, we can immediately open up those lines of communications, and we can find out how much that parent is willing to allow the information to be shared with our students. Essentially, in our society, we are afraid of that which we don't understand, correct? I think that that's a pretty safe thing to say. So I actually have an adorable story. When my son was 8 years old and he had his very first tonic-clonic seizure, we very quickly found out that he had epilepsy. And because this is an area in which I am so passionate about, I actually went with my son to school because we had to enforce an emergency action plan, an EAP. And in that EAP, it talked about teachers and what they would do, if my son were to have a seizure in school. But the bottom line is that this is something that would be very visual, that all of the other students would see if my son were to have a seizure. And then they would either be terrified of him because they wouldn't know how to help him, or they would be terrified of him because it's different. And so my son was in the 3rd grade when this happened, when he had that first seizure. So I went in talking with the teacher, and I explained to the students, again, they're 3rd graders. So it was, Asher has this thing called epilepsy. He has fireworks that go off in his brain from time to time. And when those fireworks go off in his brain, his body can start shaking and it can look really, really scary. But you know what? He's okay. And so all we have to do is we have to put Asher on the ground, and we just have to lay him on his side, because sometimes he can even throw up, and ew, that's really gross, right? And the kids laughed, and I said, all we have to do is we put something nice and soft under Asher's head, and we hold him on his side, and we just reassure him, even though he can't even hear us. And we say, it's okay, I'm here. And we go get it. We tell somebody else to go get a teacher. And then when Asher is done with his shaking, he'll get up and he'll be tired, but he's okay. Okay. So that's what we did. And you guys, seriously, cutest thing ever. For the rest of that year, those kids followed my son around like he was like the coolest thing that they'd ever seen. And it was because they wanted to help him. They felt empowered by the knowledge of what was going on. They have never judged my child for having epilepsy, and I fully believe that it is because they knew. So talk to the parents. Ask them if you can explain this. Get it in writing, because we are in special education and we do have to have all of that documentation. But talk to the parents ahead of time and be able to say, especially if it's something that's very visible, students have questions. So just ask what you can share. That's my advice in that situation.
And I'll piggyback on that, Ashley. That's the parental side, right? What do you do with the parents and how much can you say? In the classroom with the students, especially where I teach, we have the deaf and hard of hearing with low or no voice. So it's very obvious, right? There's an interpreter, I'm wearing a microphone, we have equipment in our room, we've got extra people and hands are flying with signs, and so it's really obvious to students that something is going on. And the kids that have been there, they get it, but we always have new students, right, who don't know. And so over the years, I have narrowed it down to very simple 3 things. And I just say to them, boys and girls, new to our school, whatever, that kind of thing. You don't know about this. Maybe you know somebody who has lost hearing, or maybe you don't, but this is how we handle it in our school. And they're just 3 simple things. If you can do just these 3 simple things, you can be a really great friend and be really, really helpful and help everybody in our class learn to the best of their ability. And they always want to help, right? That's the thing. They always want to help. So they're always big on that. And I do keep it simple, like do not stand between the interpreter and the student who is deaf and hard of hearing. They need to be able to visually see what's going on at all times. And if you stand between them, as my mother would say, you'd make a better door than a window. You make it so they can't hear, that kind of thing. So I narrowed down to really 3 little things. We can talk about it in just a few minutes. And then the new students, you can almost always see them go, oh, that's what I've been seeing all day. Like they have a sort of a sense of relief, like, oh, now I get it. This is something that they need or whatever. And I've actually had interpreters that have said to me, Mrs. Ryan, I'm so glad that you do that. I'm so glad that you explain to them, because this is a visual class and everything we need to be able to see what's going on. And for deaf and hard of hearing kids, their eyes have to be their ears and their eyes. So, I think keeping it simple for the students and keeping it on point. What exactly do they know and how can you set them up to be helpful? I say to them, you can really help everybody learn to the best of their ability. And they do want to help. You always got that naughty little kid who has something to say, or, some little snide remark, and you deal with those as they come up. But for the most part, kids want to help. And if you set them up for the success of that, they're more interested in knowing what's going on and how they can help that student succeed.
Yeah, Julie, I'm going to add to that and say that when we talk to teachers, we really want them to use concrete language, right? Be specific, be non-emotional. But for those students who are struggling, those are the people that you might want to pull to the side or outside of the classroom really quick and say, hey, I understand that this may be difficult for you. And here's some things we want to look for and see in an inclusive classroom, because you want to be treated the same way in an inclusive classroom and have people accept you. So sometimes if you have a student who's struggling and maybe having difficulties accepting or saying things in the classroom, just pull them to the side, have a one-to-one conversation away from everyone else so that you can help them learn to understand, because that's another piece of it. How are they morally accepting and what can we do to get them there?
Awesome. So, and then I'm gonna kind of continue on my question. So I'm getting a lot of like, be sure to like communicate and talk to parents. So at the beginning of the school year, like, how do you go about like reaching out to those parents to like figure out like, hey, like I really want to help your student be successful. Like, what advice do you have for me to help your student like be successful? Like, I don't know, like how do you reach out to them? Because I'm to the point where I've never like had to contact parents before, and I'm going to be teaching soon, and I want to be able to like build those relationships and figure out what I need to do. And I know like in IEP meetings, like attending those really help, but do they have IEP meetings before school even starts, or like, yeah, so.
They sometimes have meetings, not really. Usually it's during the school year. I would say reach out to the resource teacher originally, because they're the number one contact to the parent, and then they'll give you all the information. And then from there, most parents I've worked with that I call, they love hearing from even the art teacher. Even if, you might have that student for a semester for junior high for a quarter, they still love to hear like, oh, okay. They like to know that you that you care about their student and you really want to make them feel welcomed in the classroom. So yeah, go to the resource teacher first, and then from there, like I said, most parents, and again, most parents will be sure, very welcoming. You will have some of those parents who maybe not as involved, and that may be more difficult. So then kind of lean onto the resource teacher, because they unfortunately sometimes end up being the second parent.
Yes, I fully agree with that, with what Jesse said, and with what Julie and Lorinda said on the last question as well. This is an awesome group here. You're all my best friends now. So what I want to piggyback off of that, Ashley, what I would encourage you to do, and it's actually one of the assignments that I do with all of my secondary ed students, I encourage you to make a parent packet ahead of time. Before you even get into the school system, think about all of the things that you would like every single parent to know, no matter who they are. And you may need to make just some adjustments specific to the parents of individuals with disabilities. Most times before school starts, we have what's called a back to school night. Most times in most school districts that I've been in anyway, but you're not going to get all of the parents. So what I would do though, is I would create that parent packet that would be available to every single parent who came in. It would have all of your contact information. It would have, even if you want, if you know what your curriculum is, these are the things that we're going to be studying throughout the year. I mean, you decide what you're going to put in there. But then for the students with special needs, what I would do is I would include maybe a piece of paper in there with very specific instructions that says, if anybody asks about if any student asks about your child's disability, how willing are you for us to be able to share that this is what is going on? But that's more of a face-to-face or in telephone conversation. So be a little careful with that, but I would totally agree with Jesse in that is work with the special educator, because we know those kids. We know them very well. And most of the time we also know their families very well. So Ashley, there are going to be some people I would literally say, don't even try. Don't even try it. We're going to use very general language like what Lorinda and Julie talked about. And we're going to say we include all students, but we're not going to say anything about the actual disability. That's going to be a reality. But a parent packet can go out to every single parent. And it really does start helping you create those lines of communication.
Ashley, I have a question, if that's okay. So I work in 2 schools here in Kearney elementary schools, and one of my schools has a life skills room. And this is my first year teaching in this particular position. And I'm kind of I just feel like I could do more for the kids who come into my classroom. Just a lot of different things going on with these students in life skills, like totally different disabilities for each kiddo, and trying to adjust as they come into the room. You know, I have one first grade class that has 25 kids, and then they bring in a student who has special needs, and I just don't feel like I'm doing enough for them. So my question for the panelists is, how do you find a balance between attending to students who are in your classroom, if that is your situation, and the special needs students who come in as well? Because I do have paras, and most of the time they're really helpful, but then I also have the paras that want to do the whole thing for them. And I'm kind of like, number one, I don't want you to do everything for them. But number two, I think maybe it's like good for the paras to like get to make some art. So I'm just trying to figure out like, what is the happy medium in, I don't know, just working with everyone in one room at once.
Cameron, when you figure that one out, you let us know. Okay.
No kidding. Exactly. I think that's going to be the challenge for all of us throughout time, right? I think as educators, we always have this sense of not doing enough, right? And the thing that we need to understand is that sometimes we have to spread that love a little bit and help teach the other peers in the room how they can be supportive, and bring them into that space of helping all students in the room, no matter who they are and what abilities they have. And so I would suggest, Cameron, that One of the things that I would do is start talking about what that looks like in your room at the beginning of the year. What do we do as a community in this space to really include everyone and support each other in that caring classroom? And then the next thing is also debunk or demystify what art can look like. I think one of the other things that we have perpetuated in the art education is that art has to look a particular way. And so one of the things that I really work with my teachers is that we really need to open up that expressive quality and let students tell their story in their own way and at the ability that they are currently. That doesn't mean that you're not trying to teach skills. That doesn't mean that you're not trying to develop the student to have more abilities. It's just saying, here's what you're going to create, and it may or may not look like someone else's in the classroom. And that really helps everyone then become a member and a teacher in that collaborative workspace. The last thing that I would say about working with paras is have a conversation. Try to find them before the beginning of the school year or at some point before school, after school, and say, what do you feel is most important in your role? And ask them questions so you get to know them. Once you get to know them, then you're going to be able to say, here's some things that we really feel are important in this space. And part of that could be the fact that you want your students to try the different things. So it may be that you say to a para, I'd really like Caden to be able to try this. So if you have the stuff available for that student, and then the para has the same materials, they could be modeling it right next to the student or doing hand over hand or something like that. So really build that relationship with your para also, so that you can help them know what your philosophy is and what their philosophy is and how you can meet those.
I want to just piggyback off of one thing that Lorinda hit on there, and that was peer tutoring. That is so effective in so many areas of education, but particularly in the art room, because we have to remember that the highest form of learning is teaching. And so you will actually have students with higher abilities in your room who need more challenge. And one of the greatest things to do with those sweethearts, Cameron, is to literally challenge them and to say, hey, you are doing such a good job. I would like you to help me teach. Can you be my special helper? I mean, don't say that to a 12th grader, please, but change the wording in there. but they love it no matter what age they are, because then they get to use their skills to teach somebody else. And you just cut your work in half, because they will take it and they will run with it. I will tell you that. So absolutely excellent idea there, Lorinda.
So I actually have a question. I have a couple of special education students that don't come to class sometimes, and I'm really struggling on how to deal with this. And I've gone down and I've talked to the special education teacher, and I guess I just am not getting any kind of answers or results. So my question is, how and who do I approach on this, and what is the best way for me to handle this?
As a SPED director, I would want to know that. I would want to know if a student with special needs who is supposed to be in your classroom is not actually in your classroom. I would need to know that. There are special education teachers who are really, really wonderful at creating that learned helplessness situation, at allowing students to just do their own thing, get away with these things, because maybe your room isn't the most comfortable place for them to be. But if that learning can still take place, we need to continue to challenge that student to go out of their comfort zone. So I would go to your SPED director, because I would want to know that, so that I could address the situation, especially if it was a situation that was making you uncomfortable. I have no problem being uncomfortable. So let me kind of take that over for you. And I think every SPED director I've ever met would be happy to do that for you. Have that conversation.
And I'm just going to jump in a tiny bit here and say, I think definitely the sped director is the person to go to, but in your building, because your sped director may not be in your building. I'm in a large district and our sped director works at the White Castle and not in the building. Or the White Tower, sometimes I call it Ivory Tower, you know, they live on a up floor somewhere and not in my building. So, and sometimes, you know, the kids, the resource teacher doesn't always know either, because if they're going out for resource, maybe they go out for 3 or 4 subjects during the day, but they're really mainstream quite a bit. The resource teacher may not even know they didn't come to art or whatever. They may have missed that completely. So I always start with the classroom teacher and say, okay, so-and-so wasn't here today. What was going on? You know, it could have been that it was a really bad moment, emotional breakdown, or a physical altercation, or something that erupted, and the child really wasn't any place for any classroom at that point. They needed cool down space. At my school, we call it the Wildcat Den. You know, they need to go to the safe space in the room and just kind of de-escalate their emotions a little bit. So I always start with the presumption that the child isn't missing my class because of something with me. It may have had nothing to do with me at all, and it just was bad timing. Right. And if timing wasn't the issue, if, you know, the kid was fine and we don't know, we sent them down, they didn't come, whatever, then I start kind of, you know, kind of working my way back up the chain to say whatever. If it happens more than like 2 times in a row, and they start to say, I don't know, they didn't want to go, then I say, okay, what am I doing? What's bringing anxiety in my space? What can I change in my routines and my procedures? So I kind of go for the low hanging fruit first, and then I kind of work my way up. But then you do at some point, if you're not getting any answers and nobody seems to know why this child's IEP is not being met, because if it's in their IEP that they will be mainstreamed, you know, 50 minutes a week with their peers for art, library, music, and PE, and they're consistently not coming for those classes, then the parent wants to know, why is my child's IEP not being fulfilled? Why is my child not being mainstreamed? You know, then you have to go for higher things. But I say start small and find out, because it could be that, you know, and this is going to sound silly, but this just happened the other day. It could be a child got teased about his underpants sticking out of his pants. He got really upset and just shut down. Somebody said, oh, your underwear is hanging out. And that was it. Boom. He didn't want to do anything. He didn't want to go anywhere. He needed time to de-escalate his emotions. So first of all, don't take it personal. That's the most important thing. Never take it personal. Always, you know, start low, ask, you know, what's going on? What happened today? Why maybe they didn't come? Maybe they left early. That's another thing. If they've got appointments, especially if they have a lot of needs, they might have a lot of medical appointments or counseling appointments, that kind of thing. So kind of start low and work your way up. And if you don't see any results after a few weeks, then I would say go the next level. You know, you don't want to go a month and just pretend like nothing happened. The child's missed class for weeks. That's a big deal. So I guess that's just what I want to piggyback on to what Dr. Koch was saying.
Julie, you make a really good point there, especially about asking the classroom teacher. Another question that could be asked is, what do you notice about student, let's say Caden again, what makes Caden successful in your room? And then you can find out what are the things that are going on in that space that make that person successful. And then you can think about reflectively what's going on in your space so that you might recreate some of those things with that student. Another thing that I did when I was an elementary teacher was I would spend some planned times in the special education room with some of those students, because then I could build a relationship. Oftentimes, if you can do that in a smaller environment, it really helps. The other thing that we did in my schools is we'd have those students come in and be my helpers. That's another way that I can build that relationship with them without anyone else around. And we can really have that quiet time together so that we were able to know a rapport between us. And then when they would come to the room, I could definitely see if there was something going on with them, and I could address it in different ways.
I feel like these are all fabulous recommendations. And I was wondering if you could also add that I know in some schools, there's a culture where either the SPED teacher or the classroom teacher feels like art is not important or PE is not important. And so all of a sudden they start pulling those children out to catch up on math or to catch up on something else. So how would you recommend changing the culture and advocating for the child to be in those special classes?
That's a lifelong thing, Christy, that you bring up, right? I mean, we are definitely continuing to need to advocate about what students can learn and what happens in the art room that is successful for that social emotional needs, as well as their needs and abilities to think creatively and to develop themselves in their fine motor skills. So a couple things that I would recommend would be, one, showcasing what you're doing with students. Put it out in the hallway. We're doing thinking walls in Lincoln Public Schools to show our staff and others what students do to make connections to their world outside of the art room and how art connects to a larger world. And those are just simple pictures and words that show a connection to a larger theme that is often interdisciplinary or connected to bigger ideas. Another thing is to showcase how they're doing that. We do thinking journals, we do little videos that we showcase in different spaces, and we put those on the website so that people can see them. We also have teachers who are also showing how they're teaching with those small videos that Baily was talking about, so that we're noticing and showing how we are adapting to a universal design so that we create that space. So those are 2 or 3 things that I would say are important for you to do. And then also having a conversation and just saying, I really feel it's important for Caden to be in my space. I really want him to have this opportunity. What can I do to help get him here so that he has some time in art? And that is a conversation that can be sometimes difficult, but those difficult conversations are important because you're an advocate for that child. And you really just want to open up the conversation of saying, what is his missing skills? What are the things that I can show you that I'm going to support that in the art room? And where can we find time for that student to get here?
Awesome. So real quick, do any of the panelists want to piggyback off of Lorinda? Lorinda, that was awesome. Okay, so I wanted to make sure I jumped in here because we have quite a few questions in the chat and I want to make sure we get those answered. So Anna Marie asked, I'm returning to the art room after many years. What safety accommodations do I need to consider for my students with exceptionalities and their peers?
I was actually just typing up a response to her because I didn't know who would get back to her. So I actually just responded back to her. But basically what I would, real quick, because my daughter needs to go to the restroom. I would say have your rules or safety regulations posted and everything. And for younger kids, make sure they're clear and pretty short, like don't make anything too long. And just practice. Even with my high schoolers, I have to practice. So just making sure they're clear, concrete, and universal for everyone, because it doesn't matter what is they're a student in your classroom, as long as they're safe, and everyone can help with the safety in your classroom. So just letting them know too, it's not just my job to keep the room safe, it's their job as well.
Yeah, Jesse, that's really important. I would add that what we often think of as common sense pieces of what should happen in the room are not universal. We have every culture has different things that are common sense. So being explicit about what the safety things are or what the expectations are is going to be really important. And then modeling, what does that look like? How are we going to do this in this space, and have the students present that? So give your students, again, the opportunity to show what it's going to look like, what it's going to sound like, and where they're going to put things so that they know those safety measures. But very important is common sense is different for everyone. So when you say, hey, you guys, this is just common sense, you don't run with scissors, all around, it may not be. And so what you want to do is make sure that you're spending time with that.
And I'm just going to throw one thing after Lorinda. Sorry, Dr. Cook. And that is when you're role modeling, because it's so important to show them this is how we do it. The words procedure, this is our procedure here at school. Sometimes I'll say things like, you know, you don't go to the basketball court and use swimming rules, do you? You know, you don't swim on the basketball, to help them understand that different places have different behaviors and different rules. And so these are the procedures and the rules that we have at our school for our safety. And second piggyback is that when you are modeling, never have the children role model what not to do. Always have the children, if you're having a child demonstrate, like, oh, you know, Kathy, will you please show how we put the scissors away in our classroom? Never say, Kathy, will you please show how not to put the scissors away? If there's going to be someone who demonstrates the wrong skill, it should be the teacher. You should never ask a child to show how to do something wrongly to other children.
Julie, on top of that, it's often fun for the kids too if they see the teacher modeling negative behavior, because then they're like, oh my gosh, look what Miss Rice just did. And it creates a humor and levity in the space of how we don't want to do things.
Absolutely. And what every single person is talking about right here is the hidden curriculum. And so if you actually Google hidden curriculum in art, you will find so many of those things that other people have been like, oh crud, I didn't realize I needed to teach this, because we just do it because it is common sense, like what Julie said. And so a lot of times those things we just don't think about. So the words that you're going to want to look for are hidden curriculum in art. You will find all sorts of things that amazing art educators who have gone before you and have already figured it out through trial and really bad error. Hopefully nobody has died, but it's that hidden curriculum that really gets us both in the art room and in the PE room as well. Those are hard. So yep, hidden curriculum.
Thank you so very much.
Awesome. So Cyan also had a question in the chat. Have you ever had a parent complain about a special ed student not having their needs met in art class?
Some people are nodding their heads. My issue has always been not allowing them into the art class. So I made a lot of enemies in the world by trying to get them in there. So I'll let everybody else do this, but my experience was I had to fight to get them in there. So I'm curious what everybody else has said, if anybody has had this situation.
Well, oh, sorry, Jesse, go ahead. I've talked a lot. You talk, Jesse.
Oh yeah, so yeah, me being a special educator before I was an art teacher, I was big on my students, if they can, will be in the classroom. And yeah, I did have one time I had a student who behaviors, that was his big thing, behaviors. And she's like, he's just too much. Like he just needs to go to I'll give him the project, he'll go to your room. And I was like, why? Like, I was like, he hates being by himself. The student, and he knows right from wrong, so he knows he acts out and he gets in trouble. But then he knows he's gonna be in my room. He doesn't want to be with me. We can only talk so much. I was like, he wants to be with his friends. He wants to goof around with his friends. So I had a big conversation with the teacher, and it's like, I was like, what can I do to help you in the classroom? Like, what is he doing that's causing him to get kicked out? So that's kind of just my experience with it. And then on the flip side, I encourage all students in my classroom now as the art teacher, because I've been on the other side of it. Yeah, honestly, my biggest thing too is just talking with the resource teacher and being like, okay, what is it going to look like? Or then vice versa, I'll be like, okay, this is what I think they'll be able and capable of doing. Do you think that's what they'll be able to do? And so the biggest thing is communication both ways. As the art teacher, it might be scary to get a student that you're not comfortable with. My first year as an art teacher, I was resourced, not life skills. Life skills students, I was unaware and unsure of exactly what they need. But then again, talk to the resource teacher, get to know the student. You realize there's certain things they can and can't do. Just work with them. And I think we talked about it earlier, their art projects might be entirely different. We were going over values with my freshman. I had one student, he's a life skills student. For him, it was working on painting, because we were doing a value painting. Well, his was just work on painting, work on using a paintbrush, using using the colors, not too much, and when we put them all up, you hang them up on the wall, and everyone had these nice value paintings, and his was entirely different. And even the kids pointed out, like, oh, why is his like that? And I'm like, oh, because Alex he's working on something else. I was like, he's working on with the paintbrush, but he's doing a painting just like you guys. So I mean, it just, communication is kind of the big thing for both ends. You might, like she said, you might piss off some people, but if it's for the betterment of the student, it's the right thing to do.
The same people I ticked off at one point are now the people who are like, oh, you were right. You were fighting for kids. And I get that. And that's okay. So sometimes we have to make enemies in order to get our world to kind of open up to the idea that these kids and the people who are non-disabled can really learn a lot from each other. And so we do have to fight, and we have to build those allies. Don't be afraid to bring other people into that conversation who are also allies for kids. I think that that's really important to state that sometimes we do have to fight, and sometimes not everybody's going to look at us and say, oh, you're right, not until many years later.
Yeah. Another thing that I would say, Cyan, is that often a conversation with parents and asking them, what do you see your students' abilities being, and how would you think I could do a better job of supporting your student in my classroom so that they feel like they're getting the things that they need and that they feel like they're able to do. Because I think that we have to take a learner stance as educators also and say, maybe I don't know everything, and your experience with your student for however many years that you've had them is going to be my partnership in supporting your child in a better way. And so learn from them and then go seek out new ideas. I have had an experience though where a parent wanted me to have all of the different pieces cut out or put into the space so that the student could create. And so then I had to have a conversation about what I felt was the philosophy of art, which is the individual expression of that student. And so I didn't want to create a cookie cutter type of art piece, but rather wanted the student to be able to do their best. And that may mean tracers so that they could create their own shapes using adaptive tools, or it may mean that we are using different types of scissors, and then letting the student choose where they wanted to place those, the colors that they wanted to use, or how they wanted the end product to look. And that again goes back to that preconceived notion of what an art project should look like at the end. And we're really looking at, in this century, of really opening that up and letting students have more choice and voice in what they're making and how they're going to make it within those guided ideas of our objectives.
And super fast, just to piggyback, because the question that I heard in my head was about parents having a problem. And so way back at the beginning, when I first started teaching the self-contained students, I heard, I heard from a parent who said, my child did not make this, da, 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 da. And I was like, okay, the parent sat there with the child. I couldn't wrap my brain around it. And I said, I'm really sorry. I apologize. I was unaware that the para maybe did more work than I thought, helped more than I thought or whatever. And so then the next class, I watched really closely, and the child didn't do any of it. The para was doing all of it. And the child functioned at about 3, cognitive development was about 3 years old. And so I watched, and the para was like doing the whole thing. And I was like, okay, Julie, note to self, talk to para. Children have to do their own work. And if it's a bunch of scribbles on a page, then it's a bunch of scribbles on a page, because you cannot send home an artwork with a developmentally, the kid was about 15, but developmentally about 3 years old, and trick the parents into thinking that your child made a lovely barn or whatever. It's not going to happen. They're used to seeing those great, pages of scribbles and whatnot. So the parent really opened my eyes, right? Look around, look and see how much the paras are doing. They're doing too much. They're not doing enough. it just really tuned me in to be more aware of letting the children do as much as they possibly could in the least restrictive environment, right? And so, yes, I've had many conversations with parents over the years about, hand on hand, I will allow, doing the work for them, I will not allow. So just sometimes parents make you realize things that you just didn't even know. There's a lot we know, and there's a whole lot more that we don't know.
It is so important to talk about that too, because when you do have paras in there, we do have to remember that they do not have special education training beyond all of a sudden you're hired and surprise, you're going to work with a student with special needs. They, bless their hearts, just may not know how much or how little to do for a student. So we do have to have conversations with them and with the special educator in order to ensure that we are doing what that student needs and no more.
And then real quick on that. So talk to your paras and also be firm, be confident. When I started, I was 23 as a special education teacher. Both my paras were old enough to be my mom. And so it was a little bit, it took me a little bit to be like, Mommy. Your mom's not here. It took me a little bit to be like, okay, this is how it's going to work. This is how it's going to run. This is my classroom. Like, I am in charge. So just be confident. Don't be rude, because once you make enemies with the para, it's going to be awful. So be firm. Let them know that you are. I'm an educator. I graduated. I know I could be old enough to be your son, but I'm still in charge. So just, and it will take a little bit. If you're confident like that right away, congrats. But if you're not, just know it takes some time, especially coming straight out of college. You could be, in your early 20s, and yeah, it could be hard.
Awesome. Jesse, I really appreciate that comment as somebody who's going to start teaching at 22 years old. Thank you. But anyway, I'm going to kind of move things on a little bit because we are running a little short on time. So Ella asked a question in the chat. She said, how would you handle / initiate / supervise interactions in the classroom between students who have a disabilities and students who do not? And I actually have a question for me that I think kind of builds off of this. So how do you encourage your students who are typical to be inclusive and to embrace those students in the classroom who have disabilities? And how do you help students build friendships between those kids? Because like we talked about, sometimes when students are different things scare us. So how do you help your students learn how to embrace those differences between students who have disabilities and create friendships and stuff like that? I think that made sense.
So my classroom is right next to the life skills room. There's a big long hallway that divides us, we're way out in our own little world. So everyone that comes to my room will hear the life skills students. Sometimes they have outbursts, sometimes they're loud, sometimes things happen in the other room, and my class will stop and look up, and I've had to tell them I was oh, maybe they're having fun over there, or oh, maybe they're sometimes kids have oversensory and they just need an output. That's what that is. Just being honest. So with my high schoolers, I can be pretty straight up, oh, maybe they're just not having a good day, things like that. On the other side of it, you will have students that don't get it. I have plenty of students that just don't get it. They laugh, they think it's funny, they'll say stuff under their breath about them, and there's times where I have to pull them apart and I have to pull them aside and be like, why? I was like, that student isn't bothering you, they have done nothing to you. I was like, they have their own, they're in their own world and things happen to them. I was like, so them having to just be a person and then you adding that isn't helping the classroom. I was like, if you don't understand that and you don't get it, that's totally fine. But why make their life harder when they already are set back before, when they start off the bat, they're already behind. So why make their life any harder? And so sometimes with students, you're going to have those hard conversations with them and just let them know that in your classroom, it won't be tolerated. And if they don't understand it, just say there will be consequences if these things continue to happen. On the other side though, yeah, some kids will be super inclusive. And my daughter partner is just messing with me. So some kids will be super inclusive and want to help, but I'll answer it short because our daughter.
I say don't overcomplicate it. Just the bottom line is one thing to look for, again, do another Google search, is circle of friends. It is an excellent inclusive program that has been started in school districts all across the United States. And there are excellent resources there to be able to talk about how to include students with disabilities in daily activities and getting to know each other. I would challenge you to structure your entire classroom in the format that Circle of Friends uses, because it is so inclusive and it just does not overcomplicate things. So intermix those students, allow them to talk with each other. Do not have the same seating assignment every single day. And if you do have the same seating assignment every day, then you need to change it up every now and then, but ensure that if students are choosing their seats, they're naturally going to go away from, it's going to be students with disabilities over here, and it's going to be students without disabilities over here. That's the way that our world has taught them. So I do not, still at this level, I do not have classes that I allow students to choose their seats. Right? It's a disaster waiting to happen. But what I do is I have name tents for my students, and then I'm able to set them out. And every single day that those students come into the classroom, I say, go find your name tent and sit at that. And then that helps me to be able to learn their names as well, because I'm kind of terrible at that. So they always have their name tent. They're always sitting somewhere different. They're getting to know different people. I think don't overcomplicate it. And it's amazing how much acceptance you'll create by doing that from the very start.
That's really interesting, Bailey, because I take the philosophy of letting students choose where they sit, but the activities and the way that we interact, I mix it up. So the groupings of students then is mixed up so that they're not always with the same group of students, but they're choosing new partners for a pair share. They're going to different tables to do a group work, so that one of the things that I really feel is important is that our students have agency in some of the things that they do in our schools. And that seating place is a place where I feel that they can have some agency. And I just say to them, you can choose who you know that you're going to learn to be beside. And if you have a problem with that person, then I'm going to be able to be here to help you take care of that. And I may give you 2 or 3 warnings. I'm a baseball mom, so 3 strikes and you're out. So I'm going to remind you 3 times. I'm going to give you helpful hints. But if you can't handle that space, then I'm going to give you a new space where I believe that you will be able to learn. So I would add that counter thought to that piece, but then recreating those groupings of how kids work together in the different activities that they do.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So Shasta, she asked if anybody had a good resource for hidden curriculum in art. I'm actually curious about that. And if I find something, I'm going to post it on that resource sheet that I provided for you guys, just so you know that, Shasta. And then Brett Barnes, he asked, what is the best way to advocate for students with parents that might not have high expectations for their kids? It's a great question.
That is good. I'm going to go back to Shasta's really quick. Shasta, Bailey gave us a great example of hidden curriculum when she was talking about social emotional learning. That is a component of what we do that is part of the hidden curriculum. So don't also try to overthink that, but think about the components of that everyday life and experiences that we do to try to help students understand their world and to be contributors to our culture, that are ways that they can be a part of a larger structure of a society, because those are parts of that hidden curriculum. And then just those expectations. What are you putting into your expectations in that space, and how are you going about doing that? Those pedagogical pieces that you put into place, how are you setting up your classroom? How are you teaching your students? What questioning strategies are you using? Those are all parts of that hidden curriculum also.
So to answer Brett's question, a way to advocate is letting the parents know that their student can fail. There's chances the parents get scared with their student and don't want them to not be perfect or not be accepted. Let them know that it's okay if they fail. They're gonna do projects, let them try it. If they don't do it correctly, they don't do it correctly, and it's just a learning experience. That's what school's for. That's what your classroom's for. It's a safe space for them to try something and fail. It's just getting them ready for the world. It's just getting them ready for the world and letting them do things that they want. My example I have for this, it's not really an art example, but my wife is an FCS teacher. And so I was the resource teacher. And during COVID, she had a culinary class and she had a culinary class and she had to teach cooking virtually. And so I had a life skills student that we set up a cooking class through Zoom, just her sister, me, and my wife. And she cooked stir fried virtually by herself. And she'd never cooked before. So, and we said, if you burn the food, if you mess it up, it's not a big deal. And so she made food for her and her sister. And her mom was like in tears and was like in shock because she had never ever cooked. The student was a freshman and was at like a third grade level. So I mean, again, let them try, because they would have never known that she was able to follow those instructions without trying. Sorry about that.
Another thing that I think that to piggyback off of Jesse, because that's a really important thing, is that the art room is a space for failure. That's how creativity happens. And what we want all students to know, and their parents, is that we want our students to try new things, to go beyond what they thought they wanted to create, and to go beyond what is already out there. Someone else created that landscape or that piece of pottery. What can we do to extend it? How can we push the possibilities to make something new and different? And what can that look like? It's going to look like a lot of failures before their success, because that's how those other artists were able to create it, or those creative thinkers. So really create that message as part of your philosophy in the beginning of what you tell parents about your class, and how you want all students to keep pushing beyond what they think they know or what they think that they're capable of, to go a little bit further and see what might happen.
All right, awesome. Thank you guys. So it is 12:17, and I think we have time for maybe one more quick question if anyone has one. If that's the case, then I'm going to ask each of the panelists, could you give us, like, if you had to give us pre-service teachers or just teachers in general, one tip for helping students with special needs in your classroom, or like what is one of the most important things that you think us as art educators should do? What is it?
Use us special educators to our maximum potential. Allow us to help you. You are not on an island, and we love it when people come to us and ask us how to include students with special needs in the art room. So do not be afraid to ask for help. That would be my number one that I want every teacher to know.
I'm going to say, sorry, Jesse. I was just going to say, try to walk a mile in their shoes, right? Try to imagine being a child who has never spoken a single word. We had a boy, gosh, this is maybe 10 years ago. Family emigrated from Sudan. He was totally deaf, had spent the first 9-10 years of his life without being able to communicate to anyone. Nobody in his family signed. Nobody knew anything about sign. He basically lived with gestures and pointing and grunting. Imagine what that must be like. Imagine just for 5 minutes, how would you ever possibly get along if that were your condition? And if you're not sure how to do that, try it. If you wear glasses, smear a little Vaseline on your lenses and see what that feels like. If you're not sure what it feels like not to hear, stuff a little cotton ball in your ear and see if that changes things for you. Tie one hand to your side and see how you get along for a little while with use of only one arm. Try to empathize with the conditions with which they live to the best of your ability, and that will change how you approach your pedagogical practices.
Mine is be ready to mess up and fail and do things wrong for your students. You're going to want to be perfect your first year, but you're going to probably mess up. Own up to it, especially to your older kids, because they read through the BS. Junior high kids, they own up to it. Just say, didn't work out, or, oh, yeah, it happens. I'm not perfect. But also tell it to yourself. Tell yourself you're not perfect. You're going to learn a lot. Reach out to other teachers. Reach out to the resource teachers. Find someone that you can to kind of piggyback on, because that'll help the first couple of years as you're just learning and navigating how to be one, an educator, and then one, just to be a better teacher for the students and yourself.
Wow, Jesse, you and I are right on the same track, because mine is all about letting students know, and my teachers, that I'm still learning, right? I'm a curious learner right alongside of you, and we're going to do this together. I think that builds a culture of a space where everyone can share, and we can create an environment where we're building those relationships. I'm leaning in on my students and saying, what do you guys think? Is this the best way that we should be doing this? Or are there other ways that I should be considering? Listen to them and ask them those questions, and then say, hey, you guys, I don't really know much about this topic or this new tool or this new technique. Let's discover it together. That idea of play and exploration in the art room really has to start coming to the top. We need our students to feel comfortable in experimentation with collaboration and building those relationships.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys all so much. And with that, I am going to draw this to a close. For me personally, this has probably been one of the best panel discussions and best forums I have ever been to. I am genuinely so excited to use everything I just learned in my future with teaching. Like my first year teaching, I genuinely feel like I will be 10 times more prepared to like help students with disabilities in my classroom because of this. So thank you all so much. You're so awesome. We will do our drawing for the e-gift cards now. So how this is going to work, I'm going to share my screen, and I've got this cool little like wheel thing that'll pick a name. So I'll do that 5 times because there's 5 different winners. If you are one of the lucky folks who win, just go ahead and type your email in the chat and I will get that sent to you. Okay. Okay. So that being said, let me share my screen real quick. I'm so proud of this little like thing I found real quick, like this wheel. It's so cool. Okay. Can you guys see that? Oh, I clicked it. Josh, congratulations. You won one. So go ahead and send me a chat with your email and I'll get that Amazon e-gift card sent to you. And just to make things fair, I'm going to remove the person who won just because like everybody could get one, you know? Okay, so number 2. Ella, nice job. I already have your email, so you don't have to worry about it. Okay. And also, if you guys want me to, I'll go ahead and send this wheel to you in the resource thing, because I think this could be something cool to use in the classroom. Oh, which one is it gonna be? Megan. All right, so that's 3, so 2 more lucky winners. All right, Cyan. Good thing you asked that question, got that extra entry, right? All right, and last but not least, who's the lucky last winner? All right, Laura. I have your email too, so don't worry about it. I got you. Okay, I will send you guys the link to this. So you guys have this awesome little wheel. I'll put it in the resource thing. And I'll resend. Give me just a second. I'm gonna re-put that link in here for the resource document, just so we have it. Just a second. Seriously, guys, this was so awesome. I'm so excited about this meeting. Okay. All right. So, oh, just kidding. I don't know why I'm having troubles copying and pasting a stinking link. There we go. Okay, here is that link to the document with all the resources. Just a second. I'm having technical difficulties, folks. Okay, there you go. There's that. Also, so this was, like I said, hosted by the Nebraska Art Teacher Association. Obviously, we all know that. For you pre-service folks who aren't a member yet, do it. You get so many opportunities. And I'm really thankful for this because it actually, I just got a job. I had a job interview and it helped me get a job by being in this like program. So do it. It helps you out in the long run. Heck yeah. So I think with that being said, we can go ahead and put this meeting to an end. Thank you, guys.
I have one quick thing. If you're looking for a job, Winnebago Public Schools is still looking for a teacher. So just FYI.
So is Lincoln Public Schools. If you're wanting to do high school, send them, come our way.
So, and my room is due to get renovated in like the next handful of years. So if you want to design a state-of-the-art art classroom, you'll probably be the one designing it, because my room is like over 60 years old and hasn't been ever renovated. So, but a nice thing is we don't have a budget, just not to say that out loud. So you can get literally anything you want. But Winnebago Public Schools.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, thank you. And also Josh and Megan, I still need your email. If you want to send it to me privately too, that's okay. Or I don't know if Bob has like.
Yeah, those are in the registrants. So, oh, there we go, Josh.
Okay, thank you, Josh. I'll go ahead and get that done now so you guys can get those like to you. You are so welcome.
And who was your last person, Ashley?
It was the last person who won.
Megan.
Laura Cons is her name.
No, I'm sorry. The last one you need email from.
Megan sent it.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. Well,
nice job, Ashley. Christy, thank you for your incredible support. I know she did it, didn't she? Yep. Hey, Ash, where'd you get your job at?
So I got at Arapahoe Public Schools. I just got offered a contract. Was it yesterday, Kaz?
Yep.
Yep, it was yesterday. I had my interview on Thursday, and then at 8 a.m. the superintendent texted me. He's like, "When do you have time for a phone call this morning?" So I was pretty excited about it. I'm pretty stoked. That school, they're going through and like working to make a lot of improvements within their school system, and I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to be a really awesome school system in like a few years.
Good job.
So the remarkable thing out here is that she interviewed before she student teaches.
Mm-hmm.
So she student teaches in the fall, has a contract to start for second semester.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep, which is really rare. And they told me like after when they called me, they said like part of the reason why we want you is because of all the experience and stuff you had. And I was like,
Awesome.
Thank you, NATA.
Yeah. So what are they doing? What are they doing first semester? They'll just have a guest teacher?
I think so. I think
Right
that's what they're
now,
doing.
right now, they're looking at bringing back a retired teacher that
Oh,
used to
gotcha.
work for them 3 years ago.
Yep.
With the understanding that she would only do a semester, but they're
Understood.
still in negotiation with her.
Sure.
Mhm.
Sure. Well, that's exciting. Congratulations.
No, thank you.
Yes,
Super
yes, yes.
stoked.
Well,
So-
thank you both. I will get this downloaded and put on the YouTube channel, and we'll start sharing it out.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
All right. See you guys.
Awesome morning.
Great job,
Thank you.
Ash. Thanks, Bob.
Bye-bye.